transparency. You know, the governor, Granholm, last session said that it would cost $100 to $150 million to give true transparency. We have the same system as North Carolina, or South Carolina, and they do it for about $30,000. They were able to convert it and put it out there. Now, I brought them all in, and they said, well, that's a smaller state. We have such a complicated, it's the same system, but we have such a complicated way of doing things. Or no, they said it's so advanced that we can't give transparency that easily. So we have a budget director, John Nixon, who comes from Utah, and they have a lot of transparency, the Utah transparency. He's very interested. He'll be testifying in front of my committee on my bill coming up in the next month or so. And I mean, we do need the transparency, you know, the names of the vendors, how much, you know, a lot of times governments will say, well, we're transparent. Well, they give a budget that's got like 8 numbers, 10 million, 5 million, and 7 million. And, you know, maybe not the history that you need, and also not much of the detail. And so we need to know if, you know, if the councilman's brother is getting contracts or getting paid, or the county, you know, if the contract had bids, and what were the bids when they were finally opened, and which one did they choose. You know, we really need that kind of transparency, not some superficial kind. And really, I'll just end with this, like Senator Robertson said, it's more than just throwing the numbers out there, but also, and this is where Governor Snyder is really talking about, it's the outcomes. I mean, the debate we should be having is, we're spending how much on this program and what are we getting for it? And is that more important than these 4 other programs, and should we just eliminate it? It's really the money per outcome. And we got to get to that, and I can't say it's going to happen overnight, but I think that's where the governor wants to go, and I think we need to really encourage that. I think it's going to come this session, good transparency.
I think there's nothing more important than performance audits. When I first started as a commissioner with Nancy McConnell, one of the reasons why I ran was because I worked at Children's Village, and I saw the same test being done by the psychological clinic, by the schools, by Fairlawn, and by community mental health 4 different times. And I thought, boy, I'm going to go in there and let them know. They're going to say, wow, good job, let's stop that. I went in there and they patted me on the head and said, fine. You know, they didn't want to take it on. And so it took me a while, but I learned how to do it, and I got a committee together, and we were able to change that. But there's many things that happen in government that we don't know is duplicative. I knew because I worked there. And so I think we have to have performance audits at a government level. I started it at the county as a county commissioner because of that. And I used it as a county clerk register, and we're trying to find the money to do it now for the Secretary of State's office. I don't think there's anything more important than having somebody that knows and understands, because people are trying to protect their jobs. They're not going to tell you. It's hard to say, I'm going to come tell you something and I might lose my job because of it. So I think it's incumbent upon us. I wrote a letter to the governor maybe 8 years ago and asked her to do that, and she didn't even respond when I asked to have that done at the state. I also asked, and they wouldn't write up my bill, that said, anytime you make a law, we always put in there what the fiscal impact is on the state of Michigan government. But what about the people? What about the businesses? We need to have the fiscal impact on businesses, townships, cities, and people. That's what we're not doing at the state level that I'd like to see.
I couldn't agree with Tom or Ruth more on the importance of understanding that bureaucracies have their own agenda and need to be fought at every turn in terms of the presentations that they make to the legislature in committee or in appropriations, whether it's policy or appropriations. It's important to remember that policy committees are oversight committees. They're supposed to have oversight over the committees that deal with their particular jurisdictions. And all of us at one time over the years have seen or heard folks who've testified before our committee, and they'll say, well, and particularly this is true under Governor Granholm, was, well, the governor's taken no position on this issue, but the department's position is, okay. And they say it without any kind of awareness or sensitivity to how outrageous that sounds. Well, you're an executive branch department, but it demonstrates the fact that bureaucracies become insular in their thinking, and they have their own agendas, separate and distinct from whoever the executive happens to be or whoever the legislator happens to be. And one of the challenges that we have is that there is a prevailing attitude, or that, you know, Mr. Governor or Mr. Senator or Representative, I was here before you got here and I'll be here after you're gone, and this is the way we've always done things. And so there's an inertia in bureaucracy, and I kind of call it like an inertia of a corpse falling off a cliff. Because they've been doing things this way for so long. And so part of our job, a significant part of our job, and I think we've got a real good chance to do things now with your help, is to say no more. Justify everything that you're doing. Get rid of the silo thinking of we're only going to look at this department and only look at this department in isolation. What I want is I want bureaucrats and arguments for programs in one department having to fight with other departments to justify themselves. It's far too easy for folks in government to simply lock arms with each other and demand more from taxpayers than it is to justify properly their own existence and suffer the consequences when they can't.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. McMillan for his no vote on the 20th century corporate welfare bill, and I'd like to tell Mr. Robinson how disappointed I am in his yes vote on that. My question is for Ruth Johnson. We talked a little bit about conventions versus primaries. Is there any information online about or available about how much a primary costs the taxpayer?
I can't tell you that, Tony, but I can tell you how I estimate, and it's pretty darn close. If you have a city with 20,000 people, men, women, children, and babies, it'll cost about $20,000, about $1 a person. The only place that formula does not seem to work is Detroit and Wayne County, where it's far higher. But if we did, anytime you have an election that's statewide, we have about 10 million people, it will cost about $11 million, give or take. Plus, those clerks, which are often forgotten, they work like dogs getting ready for it, where they would be doing something else in the office. So that time you really can't put probably a price on. But figure about $1 per person, unless it's Wayne County or Detroit.
I spent 18 years with the AFL-CIO and 18 years with the UAW. I think we, as Republicans, Tea Party patriots, can write our legislatures and ask them to pass a law that the unions would take a vote when they take regular votes for membership or leaders, and take the percentage that vote Republican and give that percentage to the Republicans. And the percentage to, because 40% of the UAW is votes Republican. And they get at least 95% of the money to the Democrats. I would like that to go through the legislature, and maybe Ruth, you can comment on that. The possibility?
That would be up to these guys.
Thanks, Ron. I know the union panel's in another room, but it underlines a very important issue, that in Michigan, in certain places of employment, if they have a union, you must join that private third-party organization. You do not have a choice. And when you're trying to put food on the table for your family, it's not something that you're going to go out and fight. And that's very unfortunate in a free country. Imagine going to work somewhere where they said you have to join the Catholic Church or the Kiwanis to keep your job. That's the monopoly unions have here in this state. And it's wrong. And if they're going to spend their money on Democrats or follow what Bob King said, and one of their top priorities is to re-elect Obama, he urged all their members to get out and work hard for Democrats. They're not even this isn't government transparency, but there's no even pretension of transparency anymore between the link between the unions and the Democrats. And the way we solve that is just make it optional. You should not be forced to join a private third-party organization to keep a job.
Folks, I'm going to hold the microphone, and when 15 seconds is up, I'm going to take it back.
Two questions to Representative McMillan and Senator Robertson. There's two ways that legislative intent can be thwarted. The executive branch will fail to implement the way the legislature wants. There's a recent example of they eliminated a department and then they found that they found funding elsewhere. Bureaucrats, unelected, can thwart legislative intent. How do you change this? Final rules rather than boilerplate can be thwarted, JARC has been gutted. I used to testify before JARC, which was the final filter. It's not there anymore. How do we restore some integrity in government so it doesn't get thwarted by unelected bureaucrats or by an executive branch?
If I may go first, I agree with you. I think one of the things that we need to do is pay closer attention to the rule promulgation authority that we routinely grant in any legislation that we pass. I believe that if we can't explain ourselves in law and put it in statute and get 56 votes in the House, 20 votes in the Senate, and the governor's signature, then it shouldn't be there. And the reality is that general grants of rule promulgation authority need to be ripped out. They need to be removed. Furthermore, in those areas where we've had the greatest number of complaints about bureaucratic action, we need to re-examine those statutes. The DEQ is the one that is year in and year out. We've had the most complaints about the actions of the DEQ that they justify either through rule or by internal memoranda. I had a situation in my district where I spoke to a bureaucrat and I said, well, on what basis in statute are you doing this? And he said, we have none. Well, what basis in rule? Well, you don't have a rule. You don't have a rule. What about the internal memoranda? Well, we have no internal memoranda. Well, then how is it that you came to deny the township of Argentine the authority to do what they were doing? And he really didn't have an answer. And so what we've got to do is we've got to do a better job of lawmaking in terms of the rule promulgation that we allow under extremely limited circumstances and start pulling it out where it exists and where it's being abused.
Do you have a follow-up? We're getting short on time. I'm going to get to everyone's question.
We need to have the final filter put back in Parliament because...
Yeah, JCAR is the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, and that's where everything used to, after we passed the bill, it had to go before House and Senate members before it was implemented by an agency, and then we approved it. That was gutted, I believe, under Engler. But it was actually through the judicial branch, and I think it was ruled either unconstitutional or, so I mean, I've been told that it would require a constitutional amendment. I think before we can get that, and it sounds inside baseball, but I think if you can explain it to these folks, we can, try and get that on the ballot. I think you'd have Democrats supporting it right now, so maybe we could get 2/3. And finally, transparency. I mean, if something is that, if we can actually see how an agency is making decisions and spending its money, then we, the people, can decide whether they're thwarting legislative intent and be more aggressive at holding them accountable. And I'll just say that I think Facebook groups, I'd love to see these things pop up all over the place so that we are looking at, I know we're all busy, but we've got 10 million people. If 1% of us spent 1 hour a month, that's like 1 million hours of people looking at how the government is spending its money. Through Facebook groups, every subcommittee chair should have a Facebook group, or a Facebook group ought to pop up for higher ed subcommittee chair. And if you want to join that and look at their expenditures, I really think that these kind of avenues and tools really need to be exploited.
Linda?
Hi there. I'm here on behalf of my husband, Clint. He's a retired state employee, and he's a hot dog vendor in Lansing, downtown Lansing, in front of the state capitol. We wanted to sit it through this particular one because initiating a work group to unravel government spending and regulations, and the Secretary